Hey man, there's something you'll notice when you start paying attention to guys who seem naturally comfortable around women. And I'm not necessarily talking about the best looking guy in the room, the richest guy, or the loud guy telling everybody how confident he is. A lot of times it's actually the opposite. There's this guy who isn't doing very much. He's talking normally. He's not trying to dominate every conversation. He isn't checking every 5 seconds to see whether she laughed at his joke. He doesn't immediately change his opinion when she disagrees with him, and there's just something solid about him. You get the feeling that whether this particular interaction goes well or badly, he's going to leave the room basically the same person he was when he entered it. And that man is really what we're talking about here. Having a strong internal frame isn't walking around trying to overpower everybody. It's having a stable understanding of yourself that doesn't collapse the moment somebody gives you approval or takes approval away. And women notice that because everybody notices it. Human beings are constantly reading each other's emotional stability. We notice who becomes nervous under pressure. We notice who starts explaining themselves when challenged. We notice who changes personality depending on who's standing in front of them. So when a man remains comfortable with himself, even around a woman he's extremely attracted to, that communicates something much more powerful than another rehearsed pickup line ever could. And I think the easiest way to understand this is to think about what happens to most guys when they meet a woman they really want. Before meeting her, he has opinions, he has preferences, he has a schedule, he knows what restaurants he likes, he knows what he wants to do this weekend. Then suddenly this beautiful woman enters the picture and everything becomes negotiable. She says, "I hate that restaurant," and he says, "Yeah, actually, I don't really like it either. 5 minutes ago, you loved it." She says she hates some hobby he has, and suddenly he's explaining why he barely does it anymore. She wants to meet Tuesday night, but he already has something important planned, so he immediately cancels it, and he thinks he's being accommodating. He thinks, "I'm showing her I'm interested." But if this becomes a pattern, what he's really communicating is that his reality is weaker than hers. Everything he believed, everything he planned, everything he preferred can apparently be rearranged if she applies enough pressure. Now, ask yourself something. If you don't treat your own preferences as meaningful, why would somebody else? Again, I'm not saying become stubborn about meaningless things. If she wants sushi and you want pizza, you don't need to turn dinner into a battle for masculine dominance. That's ridiculous. The point is that flexibility should be a choice you make, not something fear forces you into. That's the distinction people miss. A strong man can change his mind. In fact, somebody who's genuinely secure can change his mind more easily than somebody who's insecure, because he doesn't experience being wrong as humiliation. Let's say you're talking to a woman and you have an opinion about something. She gives you information you didn't know, and you realize, you know what, you're right, I didn't think about it that way. You can just say that. Your identity isn't shattered because a woman made a better argument than you. That's not weak frame, that's confidence. Weakness is agreeing when you don't agree because you're afraid disagreement might reduce her attraction, and the difference is enormous. One guy changes his position because new information changed his mind. The other changes his position because he's monitoring somebody else's approval. That's why you can't reduce this concept to never agree with women or always lead or whatever oversimplified internet advice people give. If you're deliberately disagreeing just to prove that nobody influences you, you're still being influenced. You're constructing your behavior around proving something. Real stability doesn't need that performance. You hear people, you consider what they say, then you make your own decision. And man, this shows up everywhere, especially in dating. Imagine you're making plans for Friday. You say, "There's a place downtown I've been wanting to try. Let's meet there around 7. She says, "7 doesn't work. Can we do 8? "Sure, maybe 8 works." You say, "Yeah, 8 is fine." Nothing happened to your masculinity. Nobody lost some imaginary power struggle. But let's say she says, "I don't like that place. Pick somewhere else." And every place you suggest she rejects. Now, eventually you might laugh and say, "Alright, you clearly have somewhere in mind, so you choose." That's frame 2, because you're not frantically trying to pass an invisible test. You're responding to reality. Guys with weak internal stability turn every little interaction into an opportunity to prove themselves. She becomes slightly difficult, and they immediately start working harder. She becomes distant, and they chase more. She becomes upset, and they abandon whatever they believed 5 minutes ago just to restore peace. That's the pattern you need to notice. If every change in somebody else's emotional state produces an immediate change in your behavior, then they are effectively controlling your emotional steering wheel without even necessarily trying to. You know, I've seen relationships where the guy spends his entire day monitoring his girlfriend's mood. He walks into the house and she's quiet. Immediately, "What's wrong?" She says nothing. 5 minutes later, "Are you sure? Did I do something?" She says she's fine. 10 minutes later, he's replaying the last 48 hours trying to identify what mistake he made. Maybe she's just tired, man. Maybe she had a bad day. Maybe something happened at work. Maybe she wants 20 minutes without talking. But because his internal state depends on her emotional state, he cannot relax until she becomes happy again. That's exhausting for both people, and over time it creates this dynamic where her mood becomes the weather inside the household. If she's sunny, everybody's fine. If she's stormy, the entire environment changes. A grounded man can care about how his partner feels without absorbing every emotion she experiences. He can say, "You seem quiet, everything okay?" If she says, "Yeah, I just need a little time," he can give her time and continue doing whatever he was doing. That's emotional steadiness. You're available without becoming destabilized. And here's the interesting thing, that steadiness often makes people feel safer around you. Think about somebody you've known who panics whenever anything goes wrong. Maybe you're traveling somewhere and the flight gets cancelled. Immediately they're angry, pacing around, blaming everybody, acting like civilization has ended. Compare that with somebody who looks at the board and says, "Alright, that sucks, let's figure out the next flight." Who would you rather be stuck at the airport with? Obviously the second person. Why? Because their emotional system isn't adding chaos to an already inconvenient situation. Relationships work the same way. There will be problems, there will be misunderstandings, there will be financial stress, family problems, bad days, illness, disappointment. Nobody maintains perfect emotional control through all of that, but if every difficulty causes you to collapse, lash out, panic, beg, or desperately seek reassurance, eventually your partner starts feeling like she has to manage you in addition to managing the actual problem. That's where attraction can suffer, because now the relationship doesn't feel like two adults facing life together. It starts feeling like one person has to constantly stabilize the other. Now, emotional steadiness does not mean suppressing everything. I want to make that extremely clear, because guys hear words like strength and immediately think they're supposed to become robots. Your dog dies and somebody asks how you're doing. Fine. Your father is in the hospital. Doesn't bother me. Your business collapses. Whatever. Man, that's not emotional strength. Sometimes that's avoidance, wearing a tough guy costume. A stable man can say, "Yeah, this is hurting me." He can be disappointed. He can grieve. He can tell his partner he's stressed. The difference is that he isn't handing somebody else complete responsibility for regulating him. He can feel an emotion without letting the emotion determine every action he takes. Anger arrives and he doesn't immediately send the text, "He'll regret tomorrow." Fear arrives and he doesn't automatically beg somebody to stay. Jealousy arrives and instead of interrogating his girlfriend for 3 hours, he slows down and asks whether there's actually evidence of a problem or whether he's reacting to his own insecurity. That's strength. Not the absence of emotion, the ability to experience emotion without becoming its employee. Found that becomes incredibly important when somebody challenges you, because relationships involve challenges. I'm not talking about some ridiculous idea that every woman is constantly running calculated tests on men. Human beings challenge each other naturally. Maybe she disagrees with a decision, maybe she's irritated and says something sharper than usual. Maybe she asks why you did something a certain way. If you're insecure, every question can feel like disrespect. Why are you challenging me? Now you're raising your voice because you think you need to demonstrate authority. Man, if your authority disappears the moment somebody asks a question, you didn't have much authority to begin with. Sometimes the strongest response is just, "That's why I made the decision. If you think there's a better option, tell me." You don't need to win every conversation. You need to remain capable of thinking clearly inside the conversation. There's a huge difference. And ironically, the guy obsessed with proving that he's in control is usually the guy most easily controlled, because all somebody has to do is challenge his ego and immediately they can trigger a predictable reaction. That's why I always say, your frame has to exist before the woman arrives. You can't build your entire identity around attracting women and then call that a strong frame. If everything you're doing is ultimately designed to generate female approval, you're still dependent on female approval. You started going to the gym because you wanted women to notice you. You started making money because you wanted women to respect you. You bought clothes because you wanted women to look at you. You learned how to speak differently because you wanted women to respond differently. None of those improvements are bad, but at some point the motivation has to become yours. You train because you like being strong. You build financial security because you like freedom. You dress well because you enjoy presenting yourself properly. You improve socially because life is better when you know how to communicate with people. Then something interesting happens. Attraction becomes a byproduct rather than the central objective. And that's when your behavior starts feeling natural, because you're no longer constantly asking whether everything you do is increasing or decreasing your chances with somebody. So before we even talk about how this affects dating, you have to understand that the foundation is really self-trust. Do you trust yourself to make decisions? Do you trust yourself to recover when something goes wrong? Do you trust yourself to survive rejection? Do you trust yourself to leave a situation that's unhealthy even when you're emotionally attached? Because if you don't, you're going to spend your relationships trying to control everything around you. You'll try to control how she feels. You'll try to prevent her from becoming distant. You'll try to avoid every disagreement. You'll obsess over whether she's still attracted to you. But when you trust yourself, you don't need guarantees. You can love somebody deeply while understanding that life contains uncertainty. You can say, I want this relationship, I'm going to treat it seriously, and I'm going to do my part to make it work. But if one day it doesn't work, I'll still be able to stand. And man, that's where the entire dynamic changes, because a strong frame isn't the belief that you'll never lose somebody. It's the knowledge that losing somebody won't make you lose yourself. And man, that last part is where this really starts to matter in relationships, because most people are calm when everything is going their way. Anybody can appear confident when the woman is texting them constantly, telling them how much she likes them, making plans, showing affection, laughing at everything they say. There's nothing challenging your internal stability. The real test comes when something changes. Maybe she has a busy week and suddenly she's not communicating as much. Maybe she seems distracted during dinner. Maybe you make a suggestion and she says, "No, I don't really want to do that." That's when the insecure guy's mind starts running. What's happening? Is she losing interest? Did I do something? Is there another guy? And now he starts behaving differently based on the story he created without enough evidence. He texts more, he asks for reassurance, he becomes unusually affectionate. Maybe he becomes cold because he read somewhere that pulling away makes women chase. Either way, he's reacting. His behavior isn't coming from what he genuinely wants to do anymore. It's coming from fear. A grounded guy notices the change too. He's not blind. He might even ask about it if it continues, but he doesn't immediately assume catastrophe. He gives reality enough time to reveal itself. That's one of the most underrated forms of confidence, being able to sit inside uncertainty for a little while without immediately doing something to make the uncomfortable feeling disappear. Because think about how many mistakes people make simply because they can't tolerate uncertainty. She takes 6 hours to reply, and the guy sends another message, then another. Now he's embarrassed, so he gets angry and sends something passive-aggressive. She finally responds and says, "I was at my sister's graduation." Now he looks ridiculous because he created an entire crisis that never existed. Or maybe she actually is becoming less interested. Okay, blowing up her phone isn't going to solve that either. That's what self-trust gives you. You start realizing that you don't have to chase every problem the second you suspect it exists. If somebody's behavior genuinely changes over time, you'll see it. Then you can address it directly. Hey, things seem different lately. Is something going on? That's completely reasonable. And if she says she doesn't feel the same anymore, that hurts, but now you have information you can act on. What destroys your frame is spending 3 weeks trying to manipulate somebody back into behaving the way they behaved before. You become more romantic, less romantic, more available, less available, trying every combination like you're entering a password. Man, attraction isn't a safe you're trying to crack. Sometimes the answer is simply that something changed, and emotional maturity means being able to face that possibility without losing your dignity. Now, this also changes the way you handle disagreements, because a man with a stable center doesn't need every argument to end with the woman admitting that he was right. That's ego, not leadership. Let's say you're living together and you're arguing about money. Maybe you think you're spending too much. She thinks you're being overly restrictive. A weak guy can go in either direction. One version immediately gives in because he can't handle her being upset. Fine, whatever you want. He thinks he's preserving peace, but he's actually creating resentment because he still disagrees. The other version becomes aggressive because he thinks being the man means his decision automatically wins. Neither one is particularly strong. A stable man can say, "Look, I understand why you want to spend the money. I'm not saying the thing you want is stupid. I'm saying we have these bills, we're trying to save this amount, and right now, I don't think it makes sense." Then she can disagree. Maybe you talk for another 20 minutes. Maybe she makes a point you hadn't considered and you change your mind. Maybe you don't. The important part is that disagreement itself doesn't frighten you. You're trying to solve the problem, not protect your ego or eliminate her emotions. And this is important because sometimes a woman is going to be upset with you, even when you didn't necessarily do anything wrong. That's just relationships. Sometimes you make a decision she doesn't like. Sometimes you can't give her what she wants. Maybe she wants you to cancel something important because she wants to see you. You genuinely can't, she gets disappointed. Now, the guy who needs constant approval feels an enormous urge to fix her disappointment immediately. He starts explaining, "I promise I really want to see you. It's just that my boss needs this, and I told my friend I'd help him, and maybe I can leave early, and maybe..." Stop. You don't need a courtroom defense every time somebody is disappointed. You can simply say, "I know. I wanted to see you too. Tonight doesn't work. Let's do Thursday." Her being disappointed doesn't automatically mean you failed. That's such an important thing to learn, because guys who cannot tolerate a woman's disappointment eventually become incredibly easy to pressure. All somebody has to do is become unhappy, and the guy starts abandoning his boundaries to restore emotional comfort. Real though, you know, this is where the word no becomes important, and I don't mean saying no just for the sake of demonstrating that you're some dominant guy. That's childish. I mean, becoming comfortable saying no when no is actually your answer. Maybe you're exhausted and she wants to go somewhere. "Not tonight, I'm beat." Maybe she asks you to lend money for something you don't feel comfortable funding. "No, I'm not doing that." Maybe she wants you to get involved in an argument between her and somebody else, and you think getting involved would make things worse. I'm staying out of that. The interesting thing is that people usually learn your boundaries from what happens after they cross them. Anybody can announce boundaries. "I don't tolerate disrespect," okay? Then somebody repeatedly disrespects you, and you remain there explaining your boundary for the 15th time. At that point, it's not really a boundary, it's a suggestion. A boundary becomes real when your behavior changes, if it's repeatedly ignored. And again, that doesn't mean immediately abandoning somebody over every mistake. People mess up, you mess up too, but there has to be a point where your words mean something because you believe them. And man, this is why you can't fake this stuff for very long. You can watch 50 videos and memorize all the correct responses. If she does this, say that. If she pulls away, wait 3 days. If she challenges you, smile and say this sentence. Maybe you can keep that performance going for a couple dates, but eventually life presents you with a situation that wasn't in the script. Maybe you're deeply attached. Maybe you're exhausted. Maybe something genuinely threatens the relationship. Now what? The real you comes out. That's why trying to memorize confident behavior isn't nearly as useful as building a life that produces confidence naturally. If you have experience solving problems, you become calmer around problems. If you've survived rejection before, rejection becomes less terrifying. If you've learned that you can be alone and still enjoy your life, somebody threatening to leave doesn't have the same power over you. If you've built financial stability, money disagreements feel different. Confidence is often just evidence from your own history that says, "I've handled difficult things before, I'll handle this one too." That's also why I think men need to deliberately do difficult things that have absolutely nothing to do with dating. Go somewhere alone. Learn something you're terrible at. Train for something difficult. Build something and risk failing publicly. Have uncomfortable conversations instead of avoiding them. Apply for the job you think you're underqualified for. Start the business if that's what you've genuinely wanted to do. Travel somewhere unfamiliar if you have the opportunity, not because doing any one of those things magically makes women attracted to you, but because every time you enter an uncertain situation and figure it out, your relationship with yourself changes slightly. You stop seeing yourself as somebody who needs everything controlled before he can function. Then when a date doesn't go perfectly, who cares? You've dealt with harder things. When a woman doesn't like you, you're disappointed for a minute and continue moving, When somebody challenges your opinion, your heart doesn't start racing like your entire identity is under attack. That's the deeper foundation underneath all of this. You become more capable, and capability creates a calmness that is extremely difficult to imitate. And there's another piece guys overlook: humor. A man with a strong center can usually laugh at himself. That's huge. If you're terrified of looking foolish, you're going to spend your entire life trying to control everybody's perception of you. Maybe you mispronounce something on a date. You can laugh. Maybe you walk into the wrong restaurant and realize the place you're meeting is next door. That's funny. Maybe she catches you doing something slightly embarrassing. Who cares? Insecure people treat every little mistake like damage to their status. They immediately start explaining, "Well, normally I wouldn't do that. I was just tired because..." Man, nobody asked for the explanation. Laugh and move on. There's something incredibly comfortable about somebody who doesn't require every moment to make him look impressive, and that's why humor isn't just about being funny. Sometimes humor is evidence that your ego can survive imperfection. You're not trying to control every frame of the movie, you're actually participating in your own life. This is especially noticeable when a woman teases you. Some guys completely fall apart when this happens because they're unsure whether she's joking or disrespecting them. Let's say she looks at your shirt and says, "You actually left the house wearing that." If she's clearly joking, the insecure guy might become defensive. "What's wrong with my shirt? This is expensive." Now the whole interaction becomes awkward because his ego got poked. Another insecure guy might immediately agree, "Yeah, I know. I need you to help me dress." Again, he's seeking approval. A grounded guy might look down at the shirt and say, "You're just not sophisticated enough to understand it," and continue the conversation. Nothing happened, but here's the important part. If the teasing becomes genuinely disrespectful, he doesn't have to keep laughing either. That's where social awareness comes in. Being secure doesn't mean accepting every insult with a smile, because you're desperate to appear unaffected. You can calmly say, "Alright, that's enough," and mean it. The point isn't having one response to everything. The point is responding according to what you actually perceive, instead of responding according to fear of losing somebody's approval. And once you really understand that, man, you start realizing that the strongest frame isn't about controlling the interaction at all. It's about controlling your participation in it. You can't control whether she likes you. You can't control whether she agrees with you. You can't control whether she wakes up 3 months from now and decides she wants something different. You can't control whether another man walks into her life whom she finds attractive, and the guy who tries to control all of that becomes anxious because he's fighting reality itself. What you can control is whether you communicate clearly, whether you keep your word, whether you maintain your standards, whether you treat her well, whether you continue building your life, whether you respond thoughtfully instead of impulsively, and whether you're willing to leave if the relationship becomes something you no longer want to participate in. That's your territory. And when a man learns to stay inside his territory instead of desperately trying to manage somebody else's mind, his entire presence changes. He's calmer because he's no longer responsible for impossible things. He's more decisive because his decisions aren't constantly being rewritten by somebody else's reaction. And most importantly, he becomes emotionally trustworthy because the people around him know that pressure might influence his thinking, but it doesn't automatically control his behavior. And man, once you reach that point, something else starts changing. You stop confusing leadership with control. That's probably one of the biggest misunderstandings guys have. They hear that a woman likes a man who can lead and immediately imagine a guy deciding everything, telling everybody what to do, never asking anybody's opinion, basically running the relationship like a military operation. That's not leadership. If you have to force somebody to follow you, they're not really following you, they're complying. Real leadership is much quieter. It's being the person who can make a decision when a decision needs to be made. It's being able to say, "Alright, here's what I think we should do," while still being capable of hearing another perspective. Maybe you're traveling together and something goes wrong with the hotel reservation. She's stressed, you're tired. The guy obsessed with looking dominant might start barking orders at everybody because he thinks decisiveness means aggression. The grounded guy says, "Okay, give me 5 minutes. Let me see what our options are." He calls another hotel, figures out transportation, gets the situation moving. That's leadership. Nobody needed a speech about masculinity. Nobody needed to establish who was in charge. There was a problem, you remained clear-headed, and you helped solve it. That's why real competence creates authority, naturally. People trust the person who consistently demonstrates good judgment. They don't need to be told to trust him. And this is something women can notice very early, sometimes through incredibly small situations. Maybe you're walking into a restaurant and the reservation isn't showing up. How do you react? Do you immediately become irritated because now the date isn't going according to your plan? Do you start arguing with the hostess because you're embarrassed in front of the woman? Or do you just laugh and say, "Alright, looks like they lost us. Let's figure something else out. Maybe there's another place around the corner." You go there and end up having an even better night. That's the thing, man. Life constantly gives you tiny opportunities to reveal how attached you are to everything going exactly your way. And somebody with a strong internal center doesn't require perfect circumstances to remain himself. The restaurant can be wrong, the weather can ruin the plan, the movie can be terrible, she can disagree with you. None of those things have enough power to destroy the evening unless you give them that power. And ironically, those imperfect moments often tell somebody more about you than the carefully planned parts, because now she's seeing how you operate when the script breaks. That's why spontaneity becomes easier when you're grounded. The insecure guy wants everything planned because planning gives him control. We're going here at 7, then we're doing this, then we're going there. Again, planning isn't bad, planning is great. But if the restaurant is closed and now your entire mood collapses, you weren't really leading, you were relying on the plan to make you feel secure. The grounded guy can plan and then adapt. Place is closed, there's a little spot 2 blocks away. Let's try it. And if that place is terrible, maybe you both laugh about it. That's the part people forget about attraction. It's not always generated by perfection. Sometimes it's generated by the feeling that whatever happens, the two of you are going to have a good time anyway. And a man who can create that feeling isn't doing it by constantly entertaining the woman. He's doing it because he's comfortable enough with uncertainty that the unexpected doesn't automatically become negative. That's a valuable trait far beyond dating. Employers like it, friends like it, families like it. Everybody prefers being around somebody who can adjust when life changes. Now, another place this becomes extremely important is jealousy, because jealousy will expose your internal stability faster than almost anything else. You're dating a beautiful woman, other men are going to notice her. That's reality. Maybe you're at a restaurant and some guy looks at her. What are you going to do? Stare him down for 20 minutes? Start interrogating her because somebody else looked at her? Man, she didn't control the guy's eyeballs. Or maybe she tells you somebody at work asked her out and she turned him down. The insecure guy hears the first half of the sentence and mentally stops listening. Who is he? How long have you known him? Why did he think he could ask you out? What have you been saying to him? Now, one random guy at her workplace has successfully entered your relationship without even knowing it. That's what uncontrolled jealousy does. It allows strangers to influence your emotional state. A secure man can recognize that his partner is attractive, and therefore other people may find her attractive too. What matters is how she handles that attention. If she maintains appropriate boundaries, there's no crisis. If she doesn't, then you address the actual behavior, rather than fighting imaginary competitors. And man, there's a huge difference between jealousy and observation. You should pay attention to what's happening in your relationship. Being secure doesn't mean becoming naive. If your girlfriend suddenly starts hiding her phone, disappearing every weekend, lying about where she's going, and some guy is constantly appearing in the background, you don't sit there saying, "I'm confident, so none of this bothers me." That's not confidence, that's denial. Frame doesn't mean ignoring reality. It means being capable of looking at reality without immediately becoming emotionally chaotic. You notice patterns, you ask questions, you gather enough information to understand what's happening. Then you make a decision. Maybe there's an innocent explanation. Fine, maybe there isn't. If trust has genuinely been broken, you don't need to scream for 3 hours to prove you're upset. You decide what you're willing to tolerate and act accordingly. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is have an extremely calm conversation about something extremely serious, because your calmness communicates that you aren't trying to scare somebody into behaving correctly. You're deciding whether their behavior is compatible with having access to your life. And this brings us to walking away, because people love talking about walking away, like it's some attraction technique. Walk away and she'll chase you. Man, that's completely missing the point. If you're walking away specifically to make somebody chase, you haven't actually walked away. You're standing emotionally 10 feet outside the door, waiting for footsteps. You're checking your phone. You're looking at her social media. You're asking mutual friends whether she mentioned you. That's not detachment, that's a negotiation tactic. Sometimes walking away is necessary because the situation no longer meets your standards, and whether she follows you has nothing to do with the decision. That's what makes the boundary real. Let's say somebody repeatedly lies to you. You've discussed it, it happens again. Eventually you decide, I don't want a relationship where I have to constantly investigate whether I'm being told the truth, so you leave. If she comes back apologizing, maybe you evaluate whether anything meaningful has changed. Maybe you don't. But your original decision wasn't designed to create a reaction. It was designed to protect the kind of life you want to live. That's what guys struggle with, because when they're deeply attracted, they want boundaries without consequences. They want to say, I won't tolerate this, but they also desperately don't want the relationship to end, and sometimes those two desires collide. Imagine you tell somebody repeatedly that a certain behavior is unacceptable to you. She continues doing it. Now you have two choices. Either accept that the behavior is part of the relationship, or leave the relationship. What you can't realistically do is keep announcing the same boundary forever, while nothing changes. Every time you do that, your words lose weight, and eventually you stop trusting yourself. That's the part nobody talks about. When you repeatedly betray your own standards because you're afraid of losing somebody, your self-respect takes a hit. You know you told yourself you would leave if it happened again. It happened again and you stayed. So the next time you tell yourself, I won't tolerate this, somewhere inside you there's a voice saying, yeah, you probably will. That's why following through isn't primarily about teaching somebody else how to treat you. It's about teaching yourself that your own decisions mean something. When once you trust your own decisions, you become much less interested in threats and ultimatums. You don't have to constantly say, if you do that again, I'm leaving. Maybe sometimes an explicit conversation is necessary, obviously. People need to know when something bothers you, but guys who are genuinely secure usually aren't issuing threats every week because they don't need to advertise consequences. They communicate clearly and then observe. If somebody cares about the relationship, they'll usually make an effort. If they don't, you receive valuable information. That's another part of frame. Being willing to receive information you don't like. Sometimes the information is that somebody doesn't respect your boundary. Sometimes it's that she doesn't want the same future you want. Sometimes it's that she's simply not as invested as you are. A weak position tries to argue reality into becoming different. But why don't you want marriage? What if I do this? What if we wait another year? A strong position can be disappointed and still say, okay, then we're probably looking for different things. You don't need to turn incompatibility into somebody's moral failure. You know what makes this especially powerful? You're no longer terrified of difficult conversations. Most relationship problems become enormous because people avoid small conversations until they're carrying 6 months of resentment. Something bothers the guy in January. He says nothing because he doesn't want to start an argument. It happens again in February, says nothing. March, same thing. By June, she does something tiny, and suddenly he's exploding about 20 unrelated incidents. She's confused because from her perspective, everything was fine until 5 minutes ago. That's not emotional control, that's delayed emotional chaos. A grounded man can address something while it's still small. Hey, when you did that earlier, I didn't like it. That's it. Maybe she says, I didn't realize it came across that way. Problem solved in 3 minutes. Or maybe she disagrees and now you talk about it. Either way, you're dealing with reality as it occurs, instead of storing resentment like ammunition. And this is attractive in the broader sense, because people know where they stand with you. They don't have to guess whether you're secretly angry. You're not using silence as punishment. You're not pretending everything is fine and then exploding later. Oh man, when you put all of this together, you start realizing why certain men have a presence that seems difficult to explain. It's not because they've memorized some magical set of behaviors. It's because there's alignment between what they think, what they say, and what they do. If they like somebody, they're capable of showing interest. If something bothers them, they're capable of saying it. If they're wrong, they're capable of admitting it. If they say they're going to do something, there's a good chance they actually do it. If they establish a serious boundary, they don't abandon it. The moment enforcing it becomes emotionally uncomfortable. That consistency creates weight. People begin trusting your words because your words have a history behind them, and women aren't attracted to some abstract concept called frame floating around in the air. They're responding to the qualities underneath it. Self-respect, emotional regulation, decisiveness, competence, independence, honesty, and the feeling that this man isn't desperately trying to shapeshift into whatever he thinks will earn approval. But there's another level to this, man, because eventually your internal stability gets tested by something much harder than disagreement, jealousy, or a cancelled date. It gets tested when you're deeply attached to somebody and suddenly feel them pulling away. And what you do in that moment reveals whether your confidence was genuine or whether it only existed while everything was going your way.